The wind howls across the castle courtyard as a boy of 7 stands barefoot in the dirt, trembling beneath the weight of a wooden sword. His fingers are soft, still more suited for play than for war. Yet today he will take his first lesson in both obedience and pain. Behind him, his mother watches in silence, her veil fluttering like a ghost. She will not hold him again, not as her son, but as a future knight. He is a noble's child, and that means his childhood ends today. By custom, he is sent away from home to serve another lord, to learn humility before he learns glory. He will live as a page, sleeping on straw, eating at the edge of the hall, and bowing to every command. The world that greets him is cold and disciplined. The laughter of boys is met with the bark of a master-at-arms. The castle yard smells of sweat, horses, and iron. Every day begins with the sound of wooden swords clashing, ending with bruises and exhaustion. His new life is a ritual of service. He cleans boots, polishes armor until it blinds the sun, and carries messages from hall to stable. When the Lord dines, he stands beside the table, waiting for a gesture to pour wine or carve meat. He learns to move silently, to speak only when spoken to keep his eyes lowered but his wits sharp. To serve is to observe, and the boy watches everything: how knights walk, how they eat, how they command. Every gesture is a lesson in power. At night, when the torches burn low, he sneaks glances at the armory. Rows of shields hang along the stone walls, each bearing the mark of a family whose name has killed and died for generations. He runs his hand across a blade's cold edge and feels something awaken, a mixture of fear and longing. He dreams of wearing armor, of hearing his name shouted in battle songs. But first, he must survive the lessons that break weaker boys. Training begins before sunrise. They march, climb, lift, and spar until their arms ache and their legs shake. The master-at-arms, a scarred veteran of foreign wars, barks orders with no mercy. "A sword is not a toy," he growls. "It's an oath." The boy learns to hold the blade with both hands, to keep his stance firm, to strike and block in rhythm. Each mistake earns a whack from the instructor's stick. Pain becomes part of the curriculum, a teacher more honest than words. Soon, the sword feels less like a burden and more like a limb. The boy learns its balance, its music, the whisper it makes when swung through air. But his lessons extend beyond combat. He studies letters and prayer, manners and music, because a knight must kill with grace and speak with dignity. He learns to read the psalms that justify war and the songs that glorify the fallen. Slowly, the blade and the book carve the same message into his mind. Obedience is survival, and survival is honor. Sometimes, after training, he sneaks away to the chapel. He kneels before the cross and whispers to God, not for victory, but for courage. The priest tells him that fear is sin, that bravery is divine. Yet when he looks at the crucifix, he wonders if even Christ was afraid. The boy's innocence lingers, but each day it grows smaller, chipped away by routine, by bruises, by the endless demand to be strong. One morning his master throws him a real sword, dull-edged, but heavier than anything he's held before. The boy catches it and stumbles, nearly falling. The men around him laugh. His cheeks burn with shame, and something inside him hardens. He grips the hilt tighter, steadies his feet, and raises it again. The laughter fades. That night, as the castle sleeps, he lies awake staring at the rafters, his body aching, his palms raw. He can still feel the sword's weight in his hands. Not just iron, but destiny. Somewhere deep within, He understands what no child should, that the world doesn't wait for softness. Tomorrow he will swing again, and this time he will not tremble. At dawn, the boy rises before the rooster crows. The castle stirs to life in the half-darkness. Servants carrying water from the well, the clang of pots in the kitchen, the low murmur of stable hands. He pulls on a coarse tunic and ties his belt with trembling fingers. There is no mother here to dress him, no gentle hand to smooth his hair. A page must be ready before his master wakes, his body clean, his mind sharp, his voice silent. Life as a page is less about swordplay and more about servitude. He scrubs floors, polishes armor until he can see his own reflection distorted in the steel, and fetches wine for the knights at table. He learns how to pour without spilling, how to walk without sound, how to bow low enough to show respect but not humiliation. Each small act of obedience is a lesson in restraint, the first rule of a knight's discipline. When he's not serving, he observes. He studies how knights sit and speak, how they greet each other with firm hands and sharper eyes. At feasts, he listens to tales of battles and tournaments, his heart racing at the mention of heroics. Yet he also sees the tremor in the hands of old warriors, the way they wince when laughter shakes their scars. In their silence, he begins to understand what glory costs. He is allowed to ride small horses under supervision, shaggy ponies that test his patience and balance. He learns to fall and rise again, over and over, until he stops crying when he hits the ground. He practices archery with blunted arrows, wrestling with other boys in the mud, climbing ropes until his hands bleed. The castle yard becomes his classroom, pain his alphabet. The master-at-arms spares no cruelty, for softness is seen as rot. A knight who hesitates dies, the man growls, striking his wooden staff across the boy's back when he falters. Evenings are for learning letters and prayer. The chaplain teaches him Latin hymns, reminding him that a knight's sword must always serve God before man. He copies verses about honor and obedience, ink smearing on his small fingers. The words are lofty, beautiful, but he is beginning to see that the world outside the chapel walls follows a harsher scripture. One night, while serving wine in the great hall, the boy accidentally spills a few drops on a knight's cloak. The man's hand flies faster than the boy's breath, a sharp slap across the face. The hall falls silent. The lord at the head of the table says nothing. The lesson is clear. Shame is swallowed, not spoken. The boy bows, whispers an apology, and carries on. That night, as he lies awake on his straw bed, his cheek burns, but not from pain, from resolve. As months pass, he becomes more than a servant. He becomes part of the castle's rhythm. He anticipates commands before they're given, senses moods before words are spoken. The knights begin to notice his discipline. Some call him the quiet one, a compliment in a world that values silence over pride. When visitors come, he stands at attention beside the Lord's chair, invisible yet indispensable. He has learned to endure, and endurance is the seed of strength. He still dreams of shining armor, but now he knows what lies beneath it, the exhaustion, the fear, the burden of always being watched. Knighthood is no longer a fantasy. It is a mountain he must climb, one cut, one command at a time. When he turns 10, the master-at-arms places a real sword in his hands for the first time, not to fight, but to polish. Respect the blade, he says. One day, it'll be your only friend. The boy nods, not yet understanding the weight of those words. But as he runs a cloth along the steel, he sees his reflection again, sharper now, older, determined. The child who once flinched at shadows now stands steady in their midst. The boy is vanishing, and in his place, a future knight begins to emerge. By the time the boy turns 12, childhood has been stripped from him like bark from a tree. His days are longer now, his tasks heavier, and his lessons crueler. The castle yard becomes his true school, a place where laughter dies quickly and mercy is a rare luxury. Here, wooden swords give way to steel, and bruises become badges of progress. Every sunrise begins with the same command barked by the master-at-arms: stand, grip, strike. The boy learns the rhythm of combat, the weight of a sword as it cuts air, the shock of parrying a blow, the sting of failure. His knuckles split open daily, his forearms ache from blocking strikes. And yet he says nothing. The first rule of training is endurance, the second is silence. The masters call it discipline, but what they are truly teaching is control, the art of channeling rage into precision. Violence, he learns, is not chaos. It is craft. Archery lessons follow, where he must hold a bow steady until his shoulders tremble, loosing arrow after arrow into straw targets until his fingers bleed. When his aim drifts, he is told to imagine a man's heart where the bullseye lies. "Do not aim to hit," his instructor whispers. "Aim to end." The lesson is quiet, chilling, and unforgettable. Each arrow that lands true is met not with praise, but a nod. In this world, excellence is the only expectation. Then comes the lance, the knight's weapon of glory and death. Mounted on a horse that towers above him, the boy learns to couch the lance under his arm, to charge with balance and fury. The first time he rides at full gallop, his lance shatters on impact, and he's thrown to the ground. The men laugh as dust fills his mouth, but the master only says, "Good, you fell. Now rise." And he does. Again and again, until his body obeys without fear. But the most brutal training of all is the sword duel. No longer wooden, these blades are dulled but deadly. The boy faces other pages in combat, eyes burning with desperation. Every fight begins with hesitation and ends in blood. Nose, lip, knuckles, always his or theirs. And though the masters shout for technique, what matters most is will. The boy learns that courage is not the absence of fear, but the domination of it. When his blade finally strikes first, when he sees another fall before him, a strange silence fills him. Not pride, something colder, understanding. In rare moments between lessons, he tends to horses, learns the anatomy of wounds, and listens to the older squires tell tales of war. They speak of men who fought for honor, but died for nothing. Yet the glint in their eyes betrays excitement, not regret. War, they tell him, is the proving ground. It is where boys become names sung in halls, or corpses forgotten in mud. He begins to notice how easily men speak of killing. Priests bless swords, lords toast victories. Even in prayer, death is dressed in sanctity. The boy starts to see that in this world, violence is not condemned, it is consecrated. He does not question it yet. Questioning is for men, not for those still earning their scars. As his body grows stronger, so does his precision. He learns to move like water, flexible but forceful. To fight is no longer terrifying. It is instinct. The sword is no longer foreign. It is an extension of thought. Each motion becomes muscle memory, each scar a small price for perfection. One evening, the master-at-arms watches him spar and mutters to another knight. "That one has the look." The knight asks, "What look?" The master replies, "The one who kills clean." The boy doesn't hear him, but soon he will. For the path he walks now leads only one way, toward the first real blood he will spill, and the man he will never again be after it. At 14, the boy kneels before his lord and receives his new title, Squire. The word tastes heavy. earned. He has survived the years of servitude and drills, the bruises and humiliation that forged him from obedience into resolve. But what awaits him now is no less demanding: to become the shadow of a knight. As a squire, his duties double. He wakes before dawn to prepare his master's armor, oiling each link of mail until it gleams like liquid moonlight. He grooms the warhorse, sharpens the blade, and checks the leather straps of the saddle. His lord depends on him utterly, not as an equal, but as an extension of will. If a strap breaks or a blade dulls in battle, it is the squire's fault. Failure here can cost lives. Training intensifies. The master-at-arms treats him no longer as a child, but as a soldier in shaping. Sword drills stretch for hours until his wrists burn, and sweat blinds his eyes. He learns to fight on horseback, to swing a blade while galloping through mud, to aim a lance not at a target, but at a man's chest. Every motion is honed toward one cruel purpose: to kill efficiently. And yet, he is taught to call it honor. He follows his knight everywhere, to hunts, to councils, and eventually to war. On hunts, he witnesses the first lessons of real blood: the gasping of deer, the gleam of entrails on grass. His knight praises the clean kill, punishes hesitation. The boy's hands tremble the first time he drives a dagger into a wounded boar's neck. He expects to feel pride. Instead, he feels nothing at all. His knight smiles and says, "Good, you'll need that." Then comes battle. His first is not a grand campaign, but a border skirmish. Two lords fighting over land that both claim as theirs. The air stinks of smoke and fear. The squire's job is simple: to carry messages, fetch fresh weapons, and drag the wounded from the field. But chaos has its own plans. Amid the shouting and clanging steel, he finds himself separated from his knight. An enemy footman charges him, eyes wild, axe raised. Time slows. The squire reacts before he can think. His training moves through him. The sword meets flesh. The man falls, eyes wide with disbelief. The boy, the squire, stands frozen, staring at what he's done. His stomach lurches. The world is suddenly quiet except for the sound of his own breath. When his knight finds him hours later, he says nothing of the corpse at his squire's feet. Instead, he clasps his shoulder and says, "Now you know." That night, the boy does not sleep. He scrubs the blood from his hands until the skin reddens, but the smell will not leave. He prays in the dark chapel for forgiveness, yet he knows this is only the beginning. To become a knight is to make peace with death, others, and eventually your own. In the following months, the weight of the sword feels different. It is no longer a toy of training, nor a symbol of dreams. It is a burden. He begins to understand what knights mean when they speak of their vows, that courage is not born from strength, but from carrying fear without faltering. By his 16th year, his body has hardened, his skill sharpened. He rides beside his knight into tournaments, not yet competing, but watching, learning how men smile before they break each other's bones for sport. He learns how blood looks beneath sunlight, how cheers drown the screams. And though the world calls it glory, he knows better now. Knighthood is not a story of light and virtue. It is the discipline to wade through darkness and call it duty. When the day ends and he tends to his master's wounds, the knight tells him quietly, "Remember, boy, the sword makes you feared. The code makes you worthy. Without both, you're just another killer." The squire nods. Deep inside, he begins to wonder which he's becoming. As the years harden him, the squire begins to learn that the sword alone doesn't make a knight. The mind and the soul must be tempered as well. The violence he has practiced is now clothed in ritual and sanctity, transformed into what men call the chivalric code. It is whispered in prayers, carved into oaths, and spoken by priests as if it were divine law, courage, loyalty, mercy, and faith. Yet behind those noble words lies something darker, the effort to give killing a conscience. Before every campaign, the chapel bells call the knights and squires to prayer. Torches flicker, incense rises, and steel glints in candlelight. The priest blesses the weapons, sprinkling holy water upon blades that will soon draw blood. "Fight for God," he says, "and he shall forgive what must be done." The squire kneels, eyes closed, repeating the vow he has been taught since boyhood. To protect the weak, to defend the church, to honor my Lord. But as he opens his eyes and looks upon the weapons laid at the altar, he wonders how many of the weak have bled beneath those very swords. His knight teaches him that faith must stand beside violence, or the mind will fracture. "The church gives us cause," his master says one night, sharpening his blade by the fire. "Without it, we are but butchers." And so the squire learns to pray before battle, to confess afterward. Sin and salvation, two sides of the same coin, flipped endlessly in the life of every knight. The church reinforces this paradox. Priests preach that killing in the name of God is not sin, but service, that a blade raised for justice is sanctified. Crusaders returning from the East are hailed as holy warriors, their hands stained red and yet kissed by bishops. It is a convenient faith, one that turns violence into virtue. The squire absorbs these lessons quietly, yet deep within, a question takes root. Can holiness truly be found at the edge of a sword? Chivalry also demands restraint, the ideal that separates knights from brigands. The code tells him to protect women, children, and the poor, but in war, such rules dissolve like parchment in rain. He sees villages burned by both sides, churches looted by the same men who swore to defend them. When he mentions this to his knight, the man's eyes harden. "Mercy is for those who can afford it," he says. "A dead enemy cannot break his oath." The boy says nothing more, yet not all lessons are born from blood. He learns courtly manners, how to bow before a lady, how to speak in measured tones, how to dance with dignity and drink with restraint. These are not mere refinements, but tools of power. A knight must be both warrior and diplomat, killer and poet. In the candlelit halls of nobility, violence wears silk gloves. The same hand that crushes an enemy can gently lift a goblet or a queen's hand. In the quiet moments of the chapel, the squire still prays. He prays for strength, for courage, for forgiveness. But sometimes his words falter. He no longer knows which part of him God hears, the obedient servant or the silent doubter. The priests tell him that every knight's soul must be tested in battle, that doubt itself is the devil's whisper. Still, when he looks at his reflection in the polished steel, he cannot tell if he is becoming holy or hollow, and yet he clings to the code. It is the only thread that keeps madness from seeping in. The rituals, the vows, the prayers, they build a cage around the chaos inside him. The sword kills the body, the code keeps the soul from rotting. Together they form the paradox of the knight, both saint and sinner, bound by duty and driven by blood. One night, after watching his master ride off to war, the squire kneels once more before the cross. His whisper is almost a plea. "Let my blade be true. Let my heart stay clean." He does not realize that in asking for both, he is praying for the impossible. The day of knighthood dawns cold and clear. The squire rises before the sun, heart pounding in rhythm with the tolling of the chapel bell. Years of bruises, scars, and silent endurance have led to this moment. He bathes in cold water scented with herbs, a ritual of purification, washing away the blood and dirt of his youth. The water stings as it touches old wounds, as if reminding him that he carries his past into this new life. By candlelight, he dons a simple white tunic, the color of purity, and kneels before the altar. The chapel is empty, except for the priest and the sound of his own breath. He must spend the night in vigil, awake and unarmed, praying for worthiness. His sword lies on the altar before him, wrapped in linen like a relic. It gleams faintly in the dark, both beautiful and terrible. He knows that by morning, it will be consecrated not as a tool, but as a symbol, a weapon of faith and judgment. As the hours stretch, he remembers every moment that brought him here, the sting of the training stick on his back, the bloodied knuckles, the first kill, the trembling prayers whispered in fear. All of it has carved him into this shape, not a boy, not yet a man, but something forged between the two. He prays for forgiveness for what he has done, and for the strength to do what will come. When dawn breaks, the lord of the castle enters, followed by knights in gleaming mail. The chapel fills with the scent of incense and the low murmur of prayers. The squire's sword is lifted from the altar, sprinkled with holy water, and placed in his hands. The priest intones, "With this blade may you protect the weak, uphold justice, and strike down evil." The words echo through the stone hall like thunder. Then comes the moment of transformation. The Lord steps forward and draws his hand across the young man's shoulder, not gently, but with a firm, almost punishing strike. "Arise, Sir Knight," he declares. The slap, known as the colle, is the last blow the new knight must ever take without defending himself. The young man lifts his head. His heart feels heavy and hollow at once. Outside, the courtyard erupts in celebration, horns blaring, banners waving. Servants scatter rose petals at his feet, and wine flows like blood in the cups of revelers. Yet he barely tastes the feast. The ceremony, for all its pomp, feels like an ending. He has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. His innocence, long dead, is now officially buried beneath titles and vows. His first act as a knight is symbolic. He must ride through the gates in full armor, his new sword at his hip, to signify readiness for war. As the portcullis rises, sunlight spills across his face. He grips the reins tightly, the metal of his gauntlets glinting with the same light that shines on his blade. In that moment, he feels both invincible and terribly alone. Later that night, when the noise of celebration fades, he removes his armor for the first time as a knight. Each piece hits the floor with a dull thud, heavy as memory. Beneath it, his body is covered in the familiar map of scars, reminders of the boy who paid for every lesson in pain. He stares at the sword lying beside him, its edge sharp, its surface reflecting the flicker of candlelight like a living flame. He realizes then that the ceremony did not make him a knight. It only named what the years had already made him, a creature of discipline, shaped by suffering, bound by oath, and destined for war. He runs his hand along the blade and whispers a prayer, not of triumph, but of warning. For every oath, a price. Tomorrow he will learn what that means. The morning smells of iron and damp earth. Mist clings to the field, curling around the standards of two armies facing each other across the valley. The new knight sits astride his horse, armor gleaming in the weak light, heart pounding like a drum beneath his breastplate. The world is silent for a heartbeat. Then the horns sound, and silence dies forever. This is no tournament. The air is thick with the cries of men, the shudder of hooves, the hiss of arrows. For the first time, the knight feels the true weight of war. His sword, once a sacred object of ceremony, now becomes an instrument of chaos. His hands, once polished for feasts, are slick with blood and sweat. Around him, men scream prayers and curses that sound the same when the fear is deep enough. He charges when ordered, the horse beneath him surging forward like a living thunderclap. The impact is immediate, a crash of metal against flesh. His lance strikes a man's chest, shattering on contact. The force nearly throws him from the saddle. He draws his sword without thinking, slashing, blocking, thrusting. The rhythm of training takes over, but the enemy's eyes, wide and human, make each stroke heavier. The first kill is always different. It is not glorious, it is intimate. His blade meets bone, his arm shakes, and the sound, that wet, dull crack, echoes louder than the horns. The man falls. The knight stares for a moment too long. Behind him someone shouts, "Forward!" and he moves again. That hesitation will haunt him later, but for now, survival demands forgetting. As the hours drag on, the field becomes unrecognizable. Mud churns with blood, armor glints dully under the sun now high above. The smell of death hangs over everything. The knight fights without thought, lost in the blur of noise and terror. He sees his comrades fall, men who prayed beside him, laughed beside him, cut down like wheat. There is no honor here, only endurance. When the enemy finally breaks and flees, the shouts of victory rise hollowly. The knight dismounts, his legs trembling, and looks around at the carnage. His sword drips, his armor is dented and smeared, crows circle overhead. For the first time, he feels the full truth of his oath, not in pride, but in sorrow. The code had spoken of justice, protection, virtue. But here, in the dirt and the bodies, those words feel as fragile as parchment in rain. That night, the survivors gather around campfires, faces lit by orange glow. Some boast of kills, others sit silent, eyes fixed on nothing. The knight says little. When he removes his armor, the bruises on his shoulders are deep purple, his muscles twitching with exhaustion. He kneels to clean his sword in a basin of water, watching as the blood clouds the surface, red fading to pink to nothing. He thinks of the priest's blessing, of the words, "Strike down evil." But the men he struck down looked no different from his own. Same prayers, same fear. He wonders whether God truly watches battlefields, or whether men invoke his name only to justify what they cannot face alone. Before sleeping, he whispers the same prayer he once said as a boy, "Let my heart stay clean." But even as he speaks, he knows the truth. The heart does not stay clean in war. It survives by hardening, by forgetting. And so, by the firelight, with the cries of the wounded fading into the night begins to understand what his master meant years ago. Glory is not light. It is the reflection of fire on steel. Years pass, and the knight grows into legend, or something close to it. His name is known in halls where lords feast and drink to victory, his deeds recited in the verses of bards. But the stories never tell the whole of him. They do not mention how his hands tremble when he removes his gauntlets, or how he wakes in the night hearing the clash of steel and the scream of dying horses. To the world, he is a man of honor. To himself, he is a vessel filled with ghosts. He wears his armor less now, but it still stands in the corner of his chamber, catching the candlelight like an old friend and an old wound. Its surface bears scratches from wars long past, each one a scar that the poets will call glory. He knows better. He remembers where every dent came from, the faces behind them. To most men, the armor is a symbol of protection. To him, it is a cage that kept the man inside from ever truly living. The code that once guided him, the vows of courage, mercy, and faith, has become a weight he carries silently, He has tried to live by it, but he has seen too much to believe it pure. He has seen knights rob the poor they swore to protect, lords wage holy war for greed, priests bless murderers with gold-stained hands. And yet, he still kneels in prayer, not because he believes as he once did, but because the act itself is the only thing left that makes sense. He sometimes walks the castle yard, where young squires now train. Their laughter rings sharp and bright, their swords light and clumsy in their hands. He watches them fall, rise, and fight again, and in their faces he sees himself, the boy with bruises, with dreams, with faith in the shining ideal of knighthood. He wants to tell them the truth, that every oath costs a piece of one's soul, that every victory leaves something behind in the mud. But he says nothing. They must learn as he did, through pain, through loss, through blood. In the quiet of his hall, he tends to his horse, now old and gray. The animal snorts softly, its eyes dull but kind. It has carried him through war and home again, through storms and parades, through the endless rhythm of battle and silence. Together they are relics of a fading world. The knight runs a hand down the beast's neck and whispers, "We did well enough." It is the closest he has come to peace in years. Sometimes he dreams of the first day he held a sword, the weight, the laughter of older boys, the sting of the master's stick. He wonders if he would still have raised it, knowing what it would take from him. But even in that dream, the answer is always the same. He would, because in his time, in his world, there was no other path. A man's worth was measured by how he wielded a blade, how he served, how he endured. And he had done all of those things. As the years fade, he grows quieter, gentler. He helps mend the armor of younger men, teaches them to polish their blades, to care for their horses. He never boasts, never corrects their stories when they speak of glory and honor. He only listens, smiling faintly, because he knows that one day they too will see what he has seen, that beneath the shining armor, every knight is still a frightened boy, just trying to be worthy of the sword he was taught to raise. When death finally comes, it finds him in his chair, his sword resting across his knees. The fire burns low, the hall silent except for the soft crackle of wood. His armor stands beside him, gleaming faintly in the glow, a monument to a life of service, sacrifice, and sorrow. And though the poets will sing of his courage, of battles won and lords served, the truer story is simpler, quieter. He was a man who learned to kill at 7, who spent his life trying to remember what it meant to be human again. The sword falls from his lap, the fire flickers, and the last echo of iron fades into peace.